Welcome to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We are a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. As we announced last week, we also have a store at Chopped Tees now. So I'll do my best Matt Jackson impersonation and say, if you want to support us, please, or just own a really cool shirt or hoodie. There's some great merch there. Please feel free to take a look at Chopped Tees. It's chopped-tees.com /collections/social suplex network. And also this link is available on our Twitter and just to Chopped Tees in general. It's a good, easy website to visit and buy from. Today is Sunday, October 13th, 2024, and Trish and I are doing things a little bit differently this week as we are joined by our good friend and co-host of the One Nation Radio podcast, the mogul to our embassy, Rich Latta. Rich,
glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us on this Sunday.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. And I don't know. Am I your first guest, or is that what?
Yeah.
Oh my God!
No?
I feel really honored.
First guest, yeah. We've done one interview, but first guest.
Oh my God, the pressure's on.
I know, right? Better perform. There's a high level of quality that we have at this podcast.
Yeah. You guys do a great job. Well, you guys do a great job, and I do not want to mess that up. So.
No. Rich, you're here to up our standards from not journalists and less entertaining. So now we're going to be not journalists and more entertaining because you're here.
We got to talk positively or Tony Khan won't give us our payment.
Yeah. I saw you guys victims of that leak of the document. So.
The number of people who thought that was real was very funny to me. People are like, this is outrageous. I'm like, guys, this was a joke. And it was something that was released 4 years ago. That wasn't even real 4 years ago. Whatever. All right. So today, folks, we are going to kick off with our reactions and a discussion of the AEW pay-per-view WrestleDream, which happened last night in Tacoma, Washington. As we all sort of expected, Bryan Danielson lost the AEW World Championship to Jon Moxley. We also had a bunch of title changes, a few title changes. On the men's side, we had Konosuke Takeshita beating Will Osprey for the International Championship, and Brian Cage defeated Atlantis Jr. for the Ring of Honor TV Championship. So, Trish, I'll start with you. What are your immediate reactions to the WrestleDream pay-per-view?
It's been quite an interesting day because I've been reading a lot of kind of feedback after I watched it, and I watched it and just thought the show was fine. In a vacuum, I thought there was some good. I thought most matches were good.
Yes,
and there were a few great matches, but I didn't think there was anything kind of. I didn't have any standout emotions either way. And it's kind of weird to see, I know there's been some real attachment to this. And I think that probably depends on how invested you are in the main angle.
Yes, I agree with that.
But yeah, I think it kind of matched the build. So if you are just you want to see good to great matches, you're going to really invest in this card. If you want something more, you're probably going to be a bit more mid-range on it, I think. I think in cage matches the same. So you have all in and all out around the 9.1s, 9.2s, and then we've got this one's at 8.6, and I think that's kind of where I sit on this one as well.
Rich, what did you think?
I don't think I've ever watched a show where I saw more good wrestling, and then ultimately when I would think about things, I'd be like, well, why did that happen? Or, all right, what was this person doing coming into this show off the last pay-per-view, and what are they doing now? And why is this happening to them? The more I talked about it, the more I started tying myself into knots. And then I had one major problem with the big angle. And it's probably not what anyone else's really is. Like, you know, I know a lot of people are saying, oh, you know, you don't like a dark ending, you just want all happiness and everything like that, and that's fine. People can, you know, say that. Wouldn't be true in my case. You know, when I look at Wheeler Yuta and what it looked like they were setting up, like this for me, I've been talking about it on my show. It looked like it was an easy karate movie style Avenger Master type thing. I can get with that. But to have him go around for weeks and then ultimately turn on him as well, him being Danielson, and then just reassume number 4 in the unit like nothing ever happened for the past 2.5 years, it's like, all right, where are these people going ultimately? Like, and we can talk about, you know, the belt ending back up in the hands of Jon Moxley again. In the steps that it took to get there. And then it seemed like this promotion like came to a fork in the road kind of over the summer.
Yeah.
And there was one way that I think we all talked about between your show, my show, and it was like, you could go this way, right? But they didn't pick that way. They picked this other direction now. And now I'm like, we're here now. There's no turning back. Yeah. The exits have been missed at this point. So they've got to commit to this direction and ultimately take care of those other people that I think we're kind of more invested in at this point, like Hangman Page, like Swerve Strickland. You know, even like a little bit down the card, like Osprey and his whole thing with the Don Callis family blowing up. And you know, overall, there were a lot of good matches on the show. And you know, as Trish was saying, good matches are not going to be the problem, but it's like, all right, what are you doing to these people? Where are they headed? Where are they going? Like the private party thing is tough. Like when you think about it, like to just get called a mid-carder and told you're never going to be anything and then job immediately.
Yeah. Twice.
I don't get it.
Twice. Go ahead.
Do you think so? They did the promo just before the private party Bucks match last night. And I kept thinking, like, if this is just to lose, this is a really daft promo. You know, you just reaffirm, like, you're just nothing more than a mid-card act. But I think the next pay-per-view is in Newark, and they're from New York. Mm-hmm. What's the possibility that turns around and they run that back?
At this point, it's hard to invest to say, I trust that it will pay off. Yeah. Because it's like, all right, could they just as easily miss the next pay-per-view? Absolutely. Could they just as easily be jobbing to another team in the opener? Absolutely. Winning in the main event doesn't guarantee you anything. Apparently, I've now learned. So
I think that's the biggest part of this, right? Like, I liked a lot of things last night, and I know Trisha said this, the words "in a vacuum" happen over and over and over again, right? For me, at least in terms of the last couple of weeks. There were a lot of things last night I liked in a vacuum. I loved the ending angle. I thought it was awesome. I thought they did a good job. It's going to depend on the follow-up, right? I agree with you about the Yuta stuff, but I want to see what happens on Wednesday and going forward, right? There's some indications from the end that Yuta was not necessarily entirely on board with whatever Moxley's group is, with Private Party. Like, we had such a rushed build to this pay-per-view that you could see that, like, it almost seemed like it was happening in reverse. And I think that's why last night, somebody brought this up and I thought it was really smart. Last night did almost feel like an episode of Dynamite more than a pay-per-view match. Right? Like, and I think some of the stuff like with the Private Party stuff kind of added to that because it didn't feel like an end point for Private Party's journey. It felt like the beginning of the journey. But at the same time, like you said, I don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to follow up on it because I think it's just as easy that they could forget about it between now and whatever pay-per-view they decide they want to have Private Party win at. And if they do something, it'd be a rush last minute build like we've seen so often, like we saw during this pay-per-view cycle.
So splitting off the kind of two things in terms of the finish to Mox and Danielson and the end angle. Like, Sarah, you said that you quite enjoyed it. How do you view that kind of in a vacuum?
I like a big shake-up angle, and I don't have a problem with a bad ending. And that's where I feel like this is where I get sometimes frustrated with some of the the criticism, it's like, I feel like the criticism, this angle is in many ways indicative of the criticism of AEW in general. Like, people have absolutely ridiculous criticism that shouldn't even be listened to. Like, why do I care about what Julian Weeks or John LaRocca think of this? Oh, it was depressing. Like, what do I give a shit about what those guys' opinions are? Like, fuck them, right? But then you have a whole bunch of people refuting that. Like, oh no, it's okay to have a sad ending. Like, of course it's okay to have a sad ending. But there's issues with this whole angle and the build to it and the way it's been set up in a total that, like, I don't know that I trust. Like, the moving forward, the focus should be on those guys we saw at the end of the show, right? Darby, OC, and Garcia, right? That's what the focus should be.
And we will pretend Hook did not appear in that picture as well.
I aggressively agreeing with you on that one. I'm like, I don't really want to see Hook looking in the world picture. And if that's the case, if they move forward with that, then that's going to be great. I'm going to be really excited about it. But I'm more confident that Moxley's going to come out on Wednesday and give some kind of big promo. And the focus will be on those guys rather than on the baby faces chasing them. Because we've seen this with AEW over and over and over again. The heel are the ones who are constantly doing the talking. The baby faces just don't get the mics like they used to. And the focus is just not on them.
And, this is the thing. So there's been a lot made of how many heel champions they have now. And that is normally a setup because you want the hot babyface chases across a broad story. So they did this in 2021. You had Omega, right. You had the Bucks, you had Miro, and it worked. But then it's about what you do next. You can put a belt on anybody, right? And you can get that kind of you deserve it pop, and and it's the same thing with they put the belt on Takeshita. Takeshita hasn't earned that belt in the story. No, he's been being beaten for the last however many months, other than winning against Action Andretti and on Rampage, which no one's seeing. But which is why I'm fine with like how he won as a heel, because that fit in. But all you'll get then is you deserve it moments. And that's what they had in 21 to 2022. So you had Paige with the belt, you had Guevara with the belt, you had Jurassic Express and Lucha Brothers with the belt. And none of them were actually the centerpiece of the show. They weren't the promoted parts of the show. They weren't the stars of the show. They hadn't actually been elevated at all. What we've done is put the belts on them to say, hey, we brought in all these new people. We've got Danielson, we've got Cole, we've got Punk. We've brought Moxley back. But we're investing in our own people, but what you're actually doing is kind of keeping them off to a side and saying, be happy about this, make all your things of Thunder Rosa and everyone else is like, here's our homemade world champions, but actually the show is about everybody else, right? And you can't do that again. If we're finally looking at elevating some of these people that we step back on every time we brought somebody in, then great. But you have to build the show around them. You have to put them in those precious spots, those big spots. You can't just put a belt on them and then pretend like everything is solved, because nothing will change.
Well, you can see that even in the way they did the angle, right? Was Takeshita winning about Takeshita, or was it about Fletcher and Osprey?
That's what Osprey.
Fletcher and Osprey.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, sure, Takeshita won, but he didn't have a storyline, or he didn't, he was an accessory to someone else's angle.
It's almost like he did them a favor by removing the belt away from Osprey and Fletcher, because that doesn't really need the belt.
Right. And that's what this focus on the story is going to be moving forward. The focus on the story is not going to be... and again, I'm being overly negative. My guess is the focus will be on Osprey and Fletcher, and Takeshita will come out and do defenses and have some absolutely incredible matches against some, mid to undercard guys, and that'll be what he does, right?
Yeah, but that's because Osprey is presented as the star. He's the star. Doesn't matter that he doesn't have the belt. He's the star. He's the guy being promoted. He's the guy being presented. He will be in the big slots, the big matches on every single card. So that's what I mean. You have to change that mold now. We've had a whole year where we've had these main event guys who are beating each other or losing to each other, but then beating everyone underneath. John Moxley's lost to Naito this year, and that's it. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Okay. Adam Copeland, since he came into AEW, has lost to Christian Cage, and that's it. Christian lost to Adam Copeland and then had the program with Swerve Strickland straight off the back of it. So you lose some effect of Swerve beating him.
Yep.
Number one. Danielson, he lost to Eddie Kingston, but then he fell upwards.
Yeah.
To the main program with Will Ospreay at Dynasty. And then he fell upwards again into the main event for Double or Nothing. And then he beat Page and he beat Strickland. And then he lost to John Moxley, who there's no benefit of Moxley going over Danielson unless whoever goes over Moxley is actually made a centerpiece and not just a belt holder.
Right.
So you've got to change that. This year has been, we went from some of these patterns. The thing is that some of these patterns have been long identifiable, but now everyone's kind of used to the formula. So you do have to switch this up. If you keep doing this and you can put the belt on anybody. If you keep the kind of centerpiece stars stagnant, it's not going to mean a thing. So that's the real big thing this year. This year has felt old, and it's felt old and stagnant because the people with the centerpieces are still the same. It does not matter who the belts are on. But sorry, that's half a rant. But I do think it's important that you look at these things, and Takeshita is like a perfect example. And Moxley, how long do you think this run should go, Rich, being, we're on the fourth Mox run now?
So the fourth Mox run, I think we really should be, if this guy's going to get proclaimed and talked up as the ace of the company and everything, I want to see business immediately turn around. I want to see the advances for these Dynamites start taking off a little bit more. I want to see, these pay-per-view buys, I want to see them back it up, essentially. This stuff that's been, if you're going to tread down these waters that we've already kind of done, we know pretty much everything about Jon Moxley that we're ever going to know, despite him having an interesting character right now.
Yes.
And I don't want that to get lost. I think, the promos that he's doing, even though sometimes he's talking in riddles a little bit, it's okay. I think his promos are good. I'm not as into the matches, and, I was not thrilled about his work in the first half of the year, but I'll take the ride with him. However, I want to see the business that backs it up, and I want to see the people, whoever's dethroning him, this person has to be just running through everybody. I think there's too much of, someone has to lose and then get back to something. It's all right, man. Like Trish mentioned, we saw the patterns. I don't think this should go any longer than Revolution.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one. Bryan Alvarez this morning talked about Mox having the belt for a year and then losing to Darby at the next WrestleDream, and I just think that's such a huge mistake. I can't envision that being something that makes an AEW audience excited. And I say that again as somebody who I do really like Moxley. I think he's back. I'm liking this new character. I feel more energized by what he's doing than I have at any point in this spring so far. It's just a question for me, not so much about Moxley specifically as it is about returning as opposed to trying something fresh and different and new, right? We're going to go back to something we think works. And that's kind of the part that's sort of depressing after last night, or the kind of downer of last night, I guess.
And the fresh is important because, when you talk about 18 to 34, and that seems to be the demo everyone talks about these days.
Yeah.
But that responds to fresh. So you can put it on Mox and it's stable. But you will not get, I know Rich said you want to see kind of huge growth. I don't think you will get huge growth in these numbers because people have seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of a difficult one to see there being a big growth. If you get a babyface that absolutely massively hits, then possibly. But you've also got to look at the babyface contenders that you've got that were out there. Most of them have been beaten so much or have been in a spot for so long that they're not seen on that level. So you really do have to elevate them. When they're all running to the ring and the loudest guy that's getting a pop is Jeff Jarrett.
That was ridiculous.
That
just was
fucking right.
That was just fucking ridiculous. Why are you putting Jarrett out there first? I get that you think you want to have them beat somebody else up, right? But you have this whole sequence where you have Orange Cassidy at the end where clearly you're focusing on him based on the the Jerry Lynn promo, based on the other stuff. And instead of him going out there, you're going to send fucking Jeff Jarrett out there. Enough with the fucking Jeff Jarrett shit. I'm sorry, but come on.
That's a symptom. So this year, what you want to do is you can have older wrestlers and legends and that sort of thing. But the idea is you give them the pop, but the younger guy goes over. Well, this year we give them the pop, but we also put them over.
Yeah.
And then you only get reactions for these guys. And that's what we're getting. That's why you've got the Jeff Jarrett thing. But yeah, it's definitely one of them. So you can look at it as a Infinity War style storyline, a rehash of the Elite AEW storyline that kind of did not work in the year. But yeah, you've got to build these people up because you've put them in a certain spot where the audience sees them as less than others. And especially the baby faces side, They've got most of their main event people as heels, apart from Adam Cole, who...
What the hell was that?
What
the hell was that? I'm gonna scream my head off about this. What the hell was that? The last time we saw Adam Cole, he was evil. He was the devil. He was terrible. Okay? He was the bad guy, non-negotiable. He has come back. Now, I have my issues with the whole MJF thing, but at least he had an on-screen heel turn. Okay? Somewhere in the mists of Pennsylvania, Adam Cole decided to be a good guy, and we were never given. It's like they want a do-over on this shit. And how many months of last year did we have to go through that fucking devil storyline? And now it's like just forget about it. Like we took out the little fucking thing from Men in Black, and like just don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Adam Cole's a good guy now.
I gotta say, I'm not mad at it. Like, I don't want to think about the devil. I don't want to go back down that road. I honestly think Adam Cole and MJF should be banned from interacting with each other on screen.
I think they should be banned from interacting with anybody else. Let them go fight in a vacuum somewhere where we don't have to see it. Like, Jesus Christ.
Like Collision. No.
Yeah. They can have all of Collision. Go, please. Oh, God. What the fuck was that? Like, that's the stuff where, like, you talk about you're losing your audience. You talk about your audience thinking that shit doesn't matter and we don't have to care. Like, this is just the same shit as the Statlander stuff, right? Like, I am punished for paying attention now.
Yeah.
I'm punished for paying attention now. Used to be if I paid attention, I was rewarded. The little details paid off, right? People like Swerve, people like Hangman, people like the Elite, they were like, hey, you paid attention. Guess what? All these Easter eggs. Now it's like, oh, you paid attention? Sorry, you're going to be really confused.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, it's Trish brought up a great point about like the caste system sort of the lower tiered programmed baby faces going against like this heel unit that's running everything. Like, and you know, Tony's trying to keep a lot of people happy, I think, and I think that you run into these issues where it's like the new blood versus the millionaires club, essentially.
Yeah.
And who really wants to like see that? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like the genius, quote unquote, behind AEW would be we have the rest of wrestling history to look from as examples. Don't do these things, and then time after time, you see like just these old shoes getting tried on, and it's just like, all righty, well, I guess I thought we learned a lesson, but we did not.
So speaking of old shoes, let's talk about the Bryan Danielson title reign, retirement, shebang-a-bang, you know, this whole thing, and discuss. I think it's important to discuss his title reign and, you know, where we're at, you know, now that it's over and he has gone off until he comes back to not wrestle full time, which could be anywhere from every single pay-per-view to, you know, who knows. I think there's certainly a chance based on some of the stuff he said and some of the stuff that other people have said that he may be done completely based on what the situation ends up with his neck injury. But I also think that if there's any possibility of this man coming back to wrestle, he's going to do it. So I don't think we've seen the last of him. But from a standpoint of, you know, starting with where we started at All In to last night, how do you guys rank Bryan Danielson's title reign?
You go, Rich.
Are people ready to say that they have been worked? This guy was never retiring.
No.
I never bought any of it. It didn't have to be his last anything, really. I kind of think the Make-A-Wish program, Bryan Danielson title insertion largely train wrecked a lot of the world title direction for this company. And, you know,
it wasn't good.
Some people really love, you know, 2005 Ring of Honor. This guy's a legendary wrestler. We all know that. We love like some of the stuff, you know, that he did. I think everything storyline wise led to way more questions than answers. I thought he was great in the ring. You'll never hear me complain about, you know, his effort, his, you know, will to fight in the ring, his performances, none of that. However, none of the storyline stuff made sense. And people tried to justify it behind this fake retirement stipulation all summer long. And quite frankly, I was tired of it. And so I started coming out against it kind of before I knew where it was all going publicly because I'm privy to certain things. But I was just like, I'm not really feeling it. And I think, between, our show, your show, Tonal Talk, like we were all kind of saying like, yeah, man, I'm not going to be blinded by the Bryan Danielson love affair by everybody. Like there's things that's happening with this guy that we would bring up for any other wrestler.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden we just decided because he wrestled Nigel McGuinness, because he wrestled Kenta, because he wrestled Austin Aries and all these, things like that, because they were going to do Danielson and McGuinness again, which personally I don't care about. Like this stuff left me like, did all this really need the belt? Not really. Like, I was not a fan of a lot of this stuff. Like, I thought it was creatively unfulfilling. I think some of it may have been driven by him not actually being under contract.
Mm-hmm.
And, there were a lot of pressure where it would be like, whoever's working with him has to carry a large chunk of the TV going into it. Whoever's... Go ahead.
No, that's just fucking insane to me, right? I mean, I think if you look at the overall arc of Danielson's, there were three things that happened that were interesting during his reign. When he won the belt, when Mox attacked him, and the BCC turned on him, and when he lost the belt, and that was it. There was nothing else in the middle of that. Like you said, other people carried the TV. He wasn't around. He didn't do anything. He had a match with Okada, right? He had a couple of promos. He did some pre-tapes. That was it, right? And that's fine. But like you said, if there's any other world champion trying to do that shit, we'd be all over him. Like, are you kidding me?
Look how all over they were Swerve Strickland. We can just go back.
Oh.
We can go back a couple months. Oh, the show. Where is he at on the show?
Right.
What quarter hour is he in?
Right.
Is he being saved for, the NBA lead-in, stuff like that? Like, this is all stuff people didn't even want to acknowledge.
No.
But when it comes to Bryan Danielson, the WWE legend, the WrestleMania main eventer, the Ring of Honor legend, the quote-unquote greatest wrestler of all time the past 20 years, everybody got lemon booty all of a sudden. Everybody's tongues disappeared and didn't know how to speak anymore. Like I don't know what it was. Like, blinded by love.
Numbers stopped mattering all of a sudden for the people that love numbers the most. That was my favorite.
Yeah. Because that's the other thing. Like, you could argue creatively if this is not fulfilling, but it's driving business, then sure. Okay. Right? Like, I don't always agree with that approach, but, you have to take it into account. I'm going to go out on a limb and say they didn't drive any business with this reign either.
No. In fact, in terms of like performance for attendance, of the Wembley, they did 5K paid in the last 6 weeks. Fine. Wembley's Wembley. You knew you were going to have some drop. But, the performance of the Dynamites was down pretty much across the board.
Right.
We're talking 20-odd%, 29%, 47%. So and then Spokane that we had this week was the lowest attendance for a Dynamite outside of Daily's Place. So we haven't seen this huge kind of drive in business that you would use to justify this and the things that they gave up. Because you can look at the angle in isolation, you can look at that thing and what they're going to do going forward. But you've also, when you look at Danielson's reign as a whole, you have to look at what did we kind of squander or what did we kind of sacrifice to balance this. We all know, we sacrificed Paige twice, we sacrificed Swerve. So has it been
Okada's
worth it? And that
win.
story. Yeah, and Okada's first loss, which was sacrificed on 2 days' notice as an absolute nothing in something that was already a part of a John Moxley program. It's actually worse than what, maybe it's worse. You'll probably disagree. Is it worse than what they do with Max and Omega? It's similar.
It's pretty much right up there.
It's really similar.
Yeah, it's the same issues with it. And I think what they thought they were getting in their minds is that he'll win the belt and people will believe in this full-time career stipulation, which is a nonsense group of words. It's complete and utter bollocks. Like, no one's going to care. Full-time career, part-time career. You've got 4 pay-per-views next year. It doesn't make any difference.
Right.
So the stip doesn't matter. And it's not that people don't believe in the stip. It just doesn't matter because it doesn't mean anything.
It's like you really, like, if I had to tell them, like, hey, like the concept of like sum this up in one sentence, I'd be like, what does Bryan Danielson's full-time wrestling career mean? They would immediately be in 2-sentence territory.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, and that complicates everything. But I think they thought that when he won, there would be this huge outpouring of emotion, and it would be like a greatest hits tour.
Right.
So then you say, okay, he's wrestling Nigel there, and people are going to flood into Arthur Ashe. And the same thing, and they're going to, and it's going to give this lift to business that they can then flip on from there. And it's just not happened. And I think it was predictable that it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Maybe not to them.
It was to us.
It was to us.
It was to us.
It hasn't
we're
done
not that smart. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, we're not, like, come on. Like, it's not that, like, I don't get how this is that difficult to understand. I appreciate that Nigel and Danielson meant a lot to some people, right? But it's not that many people. I'm sorry, it's just not. And it's not inspiring anybody young to be like, oh, I really got to tune this in. Danielson might not show up. Like
just absurd builds for each of these big matches. Like,
right. Like, oh, he might not show up. Like, I'm not, who gives a fuck?
Right. Stay home. I don't care. And then, you combine that with the interviews, the off-putting interviews about wanting to go home and
I don't really care. It doesn't matter.
I'm like, well, let's get somebody in here that does care. Then.
Yeah. Doesn't matter to me. I don't care. I don't need to be here. Like, oh, great. Well, that makes me really want to invest in you.
Right. Because like whether it's quote unquote on the show or it's, in an interview, if it's on a Sports Illustrated or a random podcast, we all consume the media largely the same. Like it comes across the Twitter timeline. We're all discussing it largely in the same space. So like, I feel like when you're a performer, you have to be on. Like you're on in your interviews, you're on in but Danielson didn't see it that way. And I don't think anybody tapped him on the shoulder to say, hey, you should probably take it a little bit more seriously because people were consuming your words in a certain way. So I don't know.
There was one this week.
Yeah.
There was one this week.
Yeah.
So we learned nothing from the all-in stuff, but it was amazing how many people said that was a work. And then it's like, no, it's not a work. No. None of this has been a work. And I'm seeing like there's some stuff around, oh, Moxley's come back and anything that was said before was a work is like, no, stop it.
Yeah, this whole stuff about Moxley wasn't really unhappy. It was just possibly a work to get to this place. Like, dude, no.
Stop pretending this is some elaborate plan.
No.
Okay, it's not. This was Danielsons choice. I've had people push back and say it wasn't his decision, but I think Sean Ross Sapp's been quite open that it was. So we can say that. But in terms of what they got from it, it's one of those things. Do you remember back in like May 2022 in June, and we had Punk beating Hangman? We had the MJF promo that people raved about at the time, which was massively destructive. Yeah. And then we had the interim title, and everyone was just like, it's great, it's fine, you know what, like it was fantastic. And then you look back 2 years later and you think, how detrimental was these series of events? And it was, and when you weighed it up against, what they gained and what they lost massively.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. I don't think people will judge this because of the emotional attachment. I don't think people will judge this reign and how they got to it and how they come out of it fairly right now, because they're seeing it for emotional, especially if you have an attachment. I watched all the Ring of Honor stuff. I don't have an attachment. The WWE stuff, I still don't have an attachment. But the people that do aren't going to look at this in retrospect right now. They're not. So, but it will be interesting 2 years to see how the balance works out and if it was really worth it. Tony's always going to think it was worth it because it's Bryan Danielson. But it's been a chaotic 5-6 weeks. It's not, from a business sense, made any difference. In fact, businesses continue to drop. And then, especially from TV viewers, because for younger viewers, when you're making the choice, and this is the thing, so when you look at like Tuesday night's rating, and yes, they did not promote the move, but especially for younger viewers, when you're making the choice between World Series Baseball or the WNBA or, NXT or whatever it is, this was not captivating to that part of the audience.
Right.
So
it's just unfortunate. Like, it's like they took Bryan Danielson, who is, I think, I don't disagree that you could argue is one of the greatest wrestlers in the world, who's had this incredible career and all this other stuff. And this was kind of like the saddest way to end this, right? And make it not important in some ways, And for all that it seems like they wanted to recreate Sting's retirement, it feels like they did the exact opposite. Like no one believed that he was actually no one believes he's actually retiring, first of all, which is a big part of that.
There's that.
Nobody everyone's like, oh, he'll be back in like a year or so, and I mean, that's another thing that I hate to say this, but I'm just not looking forward to it. Every pay-per-view having a Bryan Danielson dream singles match with no build. Like,
you saw the Fightful thing. He's not interested to go to WWE at this time.
Oh, that's brutal.
Wasn't that right denial now? So you never know. And the thing is that the people that think there's an exact working of how this would work and that he'll play into it, and that'll be another thing where we judge in 2 years depending on where he is.
Yeah.
Like, this is a pro wrestling business. Like, anything can happen, and like, these are all like, if you don't sign a contract, I feel like it's for a reason.
Yep.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts from the show? Anyone else you want to talk about?
I thought the three-way was phenomenal. Between Ricochet, Osprey, and Takeshita, I thought that was like, when you talk about the ROPW wrestling, like the kind of explosive, fast, creative, innovative wrestling. I love that stuff. And I thought Mark Briscoe was very great against Chris Jericho too.
It was a good match. People were like, "Oh, it's the piss break match. I can skip it. It's Jericho." It was a good match, and the audience was into it.
Yeah. I think Mark Briscoe is like really one of the most underrated wrestlers there is, and I feel kind of late like to his career because I didn't watch every single thing he did in the years before, but now, unfortunately, with his brother's passing, like, he's become this singles wrestler. And I think he has so much to offer. Like, whether like you can put him in there against anybody, and he's just different enough. Like, imagine him going against the Moxley group. I think that would be compelling. You think about him against. I know he'll never tag again, but him and Hangman would be great. Him and I kind of feel like Mick Foley vibes from him.
Yeah, he has that element of kind of on the edge that Foley had as well, where you don't quite know where his line is, and that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But not in like, oh, he's going to do something dangerous, but as in like, he doesn't fit the conventional kind of thinking and how they move and how they, so I do like watching him. What did you think of some of the kind of early matches in the card? So, actually, no, let's just talk about the opener. So Jay White and Adam Page, the follow-up for Adam Page from All Out main event. This match, stop laughing. This match I thought was put together very well in terms of its structure. They went for the knee spot quite early and then built that all the way into the end. It felt like a kind of G1 match where you're not doing your kind of singles match for the Tokyo Dome, but you're doing your kind of G1 group, group phase kind of match. But should we just talk about Hangman? Because everyone's talking about Hangman, and I think they're talking about the wrong things.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Cool. So the way I look at it with Adam Page, and you've got to start to be realistic, is I think there was this thinking in the summer, this trust thing, right?
Yeah.
Where they thought, we had this thing with the Owen, we said at the time, shouldn't have been in it if he wasn't going to win it. And then they do the Strickland match All Out, and you get that because they do the angle as well. And then people go, oh, it's fine. So we gave them, and we talked about this before they even booked the match. It's like, you give them the moment, and then everybody thinks it's fine.
Yeah.
And then they can put him straight back into where he was. He's the upper mid-carder gatekeeper.
Yep.
He elevates everybody else. Yep. You're not making him a centerpiece of the show. You don't promote him as a centerpiece. You don't present him as a centerpiece. But everyone will be comfortable with it. And then when he loses, we get like this reaction. But the wins and losses are not the issue with Hangman. The belt is not the issue with Hangman. The issue is that you've had two chances where this guy was massively hot and you've squandered them.
Right.
His follow-up from All Out was to finish his next feud on the B show in the middle of the thing with barely any promotion at 11 o'clock at night. Yeah. That's not someone being treated as a star.
In a country whipping match.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a like opening match gimmick from somewhere. And yeah, so the thing is like, if you have this expectation that he's going to be straight elevated to the world title this year, you need to let that go. If you have if you have this kind of expectation that he's going to be a star, presented as a star for this, you need to let that go. If you think he's going to be the most consistent storyteller on the show and he's going to outperform his booking and therefore you're going to think that he's well looked after, yeah, that's what's going to happen. And you just got to settle expectations. I'm reading all this stuff and all these people were hitting back and forth. And it's like, yes, this guy is 33 and he has all the tools to be a main event level star, and he drives the numbers to do that as well, heavier than some of the people that they are pushing at that level. However, they are not using him that way. You just got to accept it. You know, it's like, that's where it is. You can pretend everything else, but that is where it is. You know, he has that line in that promo that he cut on social media that never made Dynamite in full, but hey, where he says, I give them everything, but they chose him. And that's exactly what keeps happening to this guy. So will it work out for him? Yeah, he'll consistently be like the best storyteller on the show. And people will look at that and think that's them investing in him, but it's how good he is. But, you know, you can get ahead of yourself now. You know, they had the chance to go that way. They didn't. They took it away. And when we found out that Mox was getting the belt, you know, I think I said to you, the words were, you know, it's they're bypassing Swerve and Hangman to do this. And that's what it is. So we've just got to accept it.
I mean, you could see this after All Out, right? The show after All Out. Who opened up the show? We talked about this last episode. It was Christian Cage, right? Yep. It's clear that Christian Cage is slotted above Hangman in terms of where Tony puts these wrestlers. In terms of, like, you know, Hangman as a heel is below Christian Cage, right? Which, you know what? Listen, it's Tony's show and that's fine. But I think this ties, ironically enough, weirdly, it ties into the Jimmy Jacobs thing that we saw this week, because so many people refuse to acknowledge that Tony Khan could make mistakes. And I get it, because, like, he takes so much weird and fucked up criticism from fucking freaks, right? Like, again, we can talk about the Larocas, we can talk about the Dave Scherers, we can talk about all the weirdos, right? So there's so many people who are like, this criticism is so unreasonable, therefore no criticism is acceptable. And people don't want to believe that Tony Khan looks at a wrestler as good as Hangman and says, upper mid-card gatekeeper, I don't see you in our main event picture, right? Because that's a fucking brutal indictment, right? Like, that's not great, you know? Like, I'm going to do all this other shit with these other guys, and I'm going to, you know, have Christian Cage out there for a monologue and all this other shit, but, like, you know, like, that's pretty rough. But people just, I think there's just a lot of AEW fans who don't ever want to acknowledge that Tony Khan has his weird foibles and things he wants to do, and, like, he's just not going to do certain stuff. I will be absolutely shocked, floored, stunned, and amazed if Hangman does anything different than what he's currently doing in the net for the remainder of his contract. Like, I just don't see it. Maybe a miracle will happen, and I would love to be wrong on this one. You know, I fucking love to be wrong about certain things, but he just doesn't.
Moxley,
he just doesn't view him like that. I mean, we see it over and over and over again. Like, how many times does a guy have to get down cycle before you acknowledge the fact that Tony doesn't want him up there?
He's John Moxley. He's Dean Ambrose. That's his career. I've gone for this for years. That's the mirror.
Yeah,
that is exactly what happens with him. Rich, you know.
Yeah, like, Hangman has never been my, like, bang the drum, this guy needs to, you know, be pushed at the top of the card or else. Like how Kenny Omega is for me, how someone like Swerve is for me now. Like,
right.
He's like, Heyman's never been that guy for me, right? I've always kind of seen, like, okay, this is kind of what's happening with him. He's had stuff in his control. He's had stuff out of his control. You know, but they see this guy, like, this summer was the first time I saw this guy. I was like, oh, they don't see it with this guy. Like right. Between, like, the whole thing with returning in the tournament, I'm like, you do not return this guy in the fashion you did and make him lose, and then do the loss to Darby Allin in the summer, which didn't really make a lot of sense. Yep. Which, you know, you did all these losses, and then you essentially threw Swerve and Hangman in there to save the blood and guts stuff. You did all these things where it's like, okay, they like him to a certain level, and I thought a lot of questions would have been answered by in the All In main event when he shows up and that crowd goes nuclear. When he I would have thought that would have bought him a little bit more equity. I thought that would have been like a message that they could have made evented Swerve and Heyman could have made evented this show, and we would have lost nothing. We perhaps maybe even would have gained from it. But I don't see the path for him in this current role, because it's like the guy's almost too good for his own good. It's like you can throw anything on the guy and he's gonna, you know, rise up essentially through his own performance. Someone like his match with Jay White, for example, tons of history from there. Like, this guy has been in all the right places at the right times to create these almost tree branches you can, these tree branches you can grab and say, okay, we'll lean into the Hangman White thing because White needs some rehabilitation now. They can always go back to Swerve and Hangman at any point now. I don't know when that'll be, and then, there's Kenny, if he ever, comes back up, that goes with Hangman. But I don't think they see Hangman as a guy on his own. He's always linked to somebody that is either like an old money guy or somebody they need to, somebody that they actually have interest in, that they are linking with him for the time being because he is so attentive to detail. He is, willing to sacrifice in the ring. He is willing to do business. So the rest of his contract is I think that I can't like call that. But I think that he is, a lot of people got to look in the mirror and start keeping it honest. Like, as far as like, all right, who's getting chosen? It's not going to be him. If the comparison is to John Moxley or something, who's Tony going to choose? He's going to choose John Moxley. Is he going to choose him or Kenny Omega? He's probably going to choose Kenny Omega. Maybe. Is he going to have to deal with whatever person comes in? That's another factor. New people that are coming in. So it's like, at the end of the day, he might just be how AJ Styles was in TNA after a while, which is sad for as much of a fan base that he is cultivated. It's like they don't love him like we do, like we've grown to love him,
right?
And how you end that All Out pay-per-view, the way he basically, it was just him alone. It wasn't a group. It wasn't, resorting to plastic bag murders and stretcher jobs like that. It was like brutality in a cage match. And then he took a couple steps towards the ring and people just lost it. And that was what it was really about. And then to show back up the next month and you're putting over somebody in the opener. Baffling. I don't know how you don't protect that, except if you don't really care.
I mean, that's pretty much it, right? I don't think there's anything that we've seen after 5 years that indicates that there's any care there, right? At least at this point. Maybe not 5 years, let's say 3.
Yeah, like he had his arc that he did with Kenny Omega, and the long-term thing with the Bucks, and who knows if the quote-unquote elite storyline is still going, right? But you see him from that point forward, it's like, this guy's a marked man. He lost Tony Khan, his favorite wrestler.
Yep.
It's always going to come back to that.
Doesn't matter about, we can talk about statistics, we can talk about ratings, we can talk about ticket sales, we can talk about pay-per-view buys, but at the end of the day, they don't see him like that, and that's just how it's going to be.
So I just don't want, if you're going to keep holding on to that, you're just going to be disappointed, and I think that's how we lose people. It's always how we lose people. It's the same when WWE didn't see it with Daniel Bryan. And that was kind of quitting point for some people. The same with Dean Ambrose, and I do think that they are very similar. Yeah, you mentioned AJ Styles and TNA, and it took him to go elsewhere before people didn't just see him as some sort of gatekeeper, that he could be more. And that's where, he'll make his own decisions when that comes up. But yeah, so that's where that one kind of is. I think that program will probably continue, though, because, they need to keep him out of the way. But we'll see. Question kind of related actually on pushing. So these are some of the questions we didn't get to last week. So apologies last time. So question from Arbitrary Elite Wrestling on Twitter. Do you think AEW is over pushing Osprey? Like, I'm not against him, but the amount of things he's involved in while still being international champion, as he was then, is just ridiculous. What do you guys think? Looking back, there was a journey to these secondary belts, Darby, Cassidy, Eddie. But now it doesn't seem so. What are your guys' opinions on AEW pushing Osprey, and has the journey to win the secondary title been lessened as the current title holders just win it ASAP when they debut?
So, yes. First of all, thank you for asking the question. It's a really smart question. It's a good question. And yes, I do think they're over pushing Osprey. And by over pushing, and I say this as somebody who's, like I said repeatedly, I like the guy. I think he's great. The matches are great. I'm interested to the programs. I think they could be a little bit better emotionally, but he's trying. But he is for me, he's turning into the new Danielson. right? Where it doesn't matter what setback he has. He will be out there next week in the main event. He will be out there on the next Dynamite going for another belt. He'll be out there in a big segment or doing something big on a pay-per-view in a match that doesn't have a lot of emotional stakes. And everybody will go, oh my God, it was so incredible, 5 stars or whatever. And, we continue to lose viewers because people just don't have a reason to care, right? And like, that sounds kind of harsh, but like, ultimately that's where I'm at. I like Osprey a lot, but it's just so much fucking Osprey.
Rich, you love Osprey, so
Yeah.
what's your opinion?
I'm gonna slightly disagree. So like, I think when you sign Will Ospreay, you know what he is walking in the door. Like, this is a guy that's been called the best wrestler in the world for the past 5 years, essentially. I think the quote unquote over pushing of him is to get people on board that may not be familiar with him, because we all know the ability is there. And this guy has also been trying to author some type of legendary title win for a long time that in New Japan he didn't really get. Like, so like, he was the IWGP champion once, but that was straight in the middle of the pandemic. And I think, if it was something I had to criticize New Japan for, it was not going all the way with him in like 2023. But it wasn't his time there. So eventually it will be his time. So they have to come up with creative ways, I think, to keep people engaged on him that have already been on that journey. That are like, I see this thing now that he's doing with Kyle Fletcher is perhaps being, a huge emotional thing, especially like older wrestler, younger wrestler kind of linked. And I think that it's say he wins the belt next summer. Is that too early? I don't think so. I think he would have already paid his dues and been seen as an AEW wrestler and grown roots in the promotion. I think the over pushing is to make sure he has things to do while already not being the champion, because so many people see him as so great right now. He could step in and just be the champion, but you got to give this guy exciting things to do.
I think the issue is not actually him. I think there's 2 issues. So I think some of it is around when we started in AEW, you had this fallacy that anybody could rise.
Yeah.
That anyone could, by their hard work and turning numbers, like Darby in that TNT title reign, you could be elevated. And now it's like they know who's anointed and who's not. So the formula has been kind of picked out. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people that see Osprey and he comes in and he's treated like a main eventer straight away, and he's presented and positioned and everything like that. And the fact that he's, he gets the singles matches at Wembley, he's getting the singles matches at Forbidden Door, he's getting the singles matches on Grass, all the things that, these big spots where you can tell who they're actually invested in and who they're not. For anyone that's not been invested in him, you see this guy coming in, but you think, hey, I've put my investment in Takeshita, and I finally thought he was getting somewhere, and then he's fed to this guy. Or, I put my investment in Orange Cassidy or whoever, Eddie Kingston, whoever it is. So then it's like a challenge to that because he's coming to the top and you're not having this journey with him. I think this is really important for younger fans as well, is that, you have to feel like you're part of something, like you're part of a journey. And you look at how Cody went into WWE, that it was actually kind of starting to slow down a little bit until, the stuff with The Rock happened and they felt like, no, we want to be part of this journey and we're going to lift him up. So you kind of have to convince everyone that they are part of that, but they're so used to the booking cycles and how it works that they can see that he's already on that path. And so the ones that aren't invested, it's harder to get them across, especially because you're doing it at the, dispensation of people that you've been invested in. And that will definitely be for more people that weren't into, New Japan or didn't come from WWE. Or it's the same thing when we talk about the Danielson thing. There's a split, right? There's people that aren't invested in him because they weren't invested then. Right. And there's people that are. And I think that's similar with Osprey. But the other thing I think this year is that the focus has been on him and Danielson for the most part. And they're very, very similar. Yeah. In a lot of ways. So you've got this one style of wrestling that's kind of dominated the show. So similar to last year where you had the Max kind of comedy stuff and, whatever flavor of ice cream that was, it kind of dominated the show for like a year. Well, this year's been like the dream match year. So you're getting these dream matches, but there's no real huge emotional attachment to a lot of them. and you've got people going in and working, like Max wants to work a dream match program with Osprey rather than anything else. So all of a sudden the show is just full of one type of wrestling. And if you love that type of wrestling, if you're into just like, yeah, I want good matches, I want them exhibition matches, but you don't want some of the other stuff, then great, you're probably having the best year of some of the best months ever. But if you want some of the different things, then you're not. So it's that thing. So AEW for me works better when there's a fusion, when there's a mix of styles. And every time that it tends to kind of move over and be dominated by one style or led by either it's one wrestler or top or two, then that's when it struggles, because the fan base is so broad. It's not made up of one type of fan.
Agree.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So yeah, this is a dream match era, and hopefully, we move forward. He needs to be in there with people that can work different styles. He needs to be in there with storytellers. He was much better in the Swerve Strickland program. Why? Yeah. Because Swerve got different things out of him. And that's the sort of thing. He needs to be working with people like that who are going to challenge him in different ways and are going to, explore that character. So by the time he does get that belt, the people that aren't engaged with him currently feel like he's earned it and they're invested in him. Otherwise, he'll be in that Danielson lock of could be the greatest wrestler of all time, but you want to turn him into a draw, and that's how you have to do it.
He just hasn't suffered any adversity at all, in terms of like an over-pushed perspective. Like nothing, I don't say nothing bad has happened to him, but like nothing bad has happened to him, And like I think from an emotional perspective, if you want to get invested in somebody and you just, again, like every week they'll be on TV and they'll be, doing great matches, like, okay, like I don't know. I like Osprey a lot. I would like to see some different things out of him, but
I think it's going to come down to like who some of his opponents are, because I know he has like that kind of like hard hitting, like kind of grittier or even like, a hardcore element to him. Like he had a great feud with like Satoshi Kojima and like, I don't know, I think through the 2022, I think the beginning of that year.
Yeah.
It might've been 23 even. Where it was like, okay, this is not Osprey's typical match. I think he has to be careful of not having the same match continuously with everybody, because just switch up the bags just enough to where it's like, all right, we missed that, like, or form a tag team or something like that, to where it's like you got to take the and I think he kind of already did that. It's like you dim yourself down a little bit to try to rise up later, with the stuff with Swerve, with like, do I feel like I got the best out of him when he was with MJF? I didn't.
No,
but maybe he has to save that, ultimate best level for when he's actually going for the belt. So I don't know.
See, it's the thing, but you kind of want him to be a little bit more Kenny Omega.
Yeah.
Which is hard to say.
I want everyone to be more Kenny Omega.
Sure. And I think there is a natural tendency to be wary of, the criticism that they got for the way they introduced Omega when they came into AEW, and not repeating that. But you can go too much kind of the other way as well. But yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think there's the thing, you've got so much top talent and everyone's going to want either moments or actually want to see them succeed. And not everybody is going to be able to be in them spots. No. There's only so many spots. So yeah, it's how you balance that out. But in terms of doing that, they have a new TV deal, finally. We have it.
I know.
We didn't do a B show. We did not do a B show, Rich. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was watching football. So AEW have announced new TV deal with WBD covering just Dynamite and Collision in terms of TV products. Rampage is persona non grata for the moment. Deal is said to be worth $185 million across 3 years, with an option for a fourth year, and was put out through Variety on the day of the anniversary show. Funny that. No one expected that one. And this matches up with other deals that have been done recently. So SmackDown on USA, which is on average of $287 million a year across 5 years. NXT going to the CW, moving from $15 million to $25 million across 5 years. And Raw moving from $265 million to $345 million a year across 10 years, with a get-out clause of 5 on Netflix. But obviously with a huge caveat that includes a lot of worldwide deals. So some key points that we can just discuss some elements on. So they are going to just Collision and Dynamite for WWE's TV content. And the shows will be remaining on their current days, which should be interesting. So we didn't get rid of Saturday. But most importantly, they're going to be simulcast on Max beginning in January. Now, Max has 52.4 million subscribers as of June 2024. Some of them will get it through their cable package. They won't be new, but it does open up different markets. What do you think adding kind of Dynamite and Collision on Max will do for AEW?
I don't think there's a downside to it whatsoever. I think anytime you can open up a different media type and put your product on it, it's only going to help you. I think we saw that, the pay-per-views on Peacock, I think, were a huge reason why WWE took off the way that it did, was the easy accessibility of their product on Peacock. So I think it's a tremendous positive for them. I don't think there's any way it's a negative.
I think you'll possibly be, I wonder how much like it will cut into the actual ratings. Like people like, what is the Max audience crossover with, cable television? Like, is it going to get in a situation where Dynamite drops an additional, 150,000 people a week on the generous side, right? And how, that stuff will be weaponized. But at the end of the day, there's enough money there, I think, that to offset any concern about various trolls, grifters, and various people who were just overtly wrong and also have some type of mental illness who tried to analyze this stuff. I
resemble that remark.
I just want to steal a phrase from Trish's folks. They just need to get in the bin.
Get in the bin. I'm going to teach you to say it in British. Like, get in the bin.
Get in the bin.
That popped me.
I was actually talking to our friend Susie about you yesterday and about you didn't know what a fortnight was, and she told me I need to ask you. By the way, if I say it's what time is it now? It's 7:20. What does that mean to you?
Oh, that's 7:20.
Right. Okay. So you do know.
Yeah.
I've had things like that.
But I heard Sam say Fortnite, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna ask because I didn't know.
We were like, really?
It's a confusing one, yeah.
No, but it's I think this is the most important part of the deal. So everyone wants to focus on the monetary number, and yes, they've got a huge increase. And that's a massive achievement for him as a businessman, as for AEW as a business, and for their performance and the way that they've integrated with WWED over the last 5 years have been worth. But the Max thing is your security blanket. Yeah. So this is a completely volatile situation in terms of media and TV. So no matter what happens now, whether we see more transition as we've seen for the last 5 years from cable to streaming, whether anything reverses and it goes back and we see bizarrely, an increase in kind of cable viewership. We have seen some of the stuff with the NFL, so it's not out there completely to see TV kind of catching up in some areas. But whatever happens with this landscape, you are safeguarded. You have access, and now you have access to additional people. And especially when you look at streaming where, we talk about 18 to 34 at a time, you've got much more access potentially to that audience. So if you are losing your 18 to 34 through, as a lot of people argue, through cord cutting, well, we're going to see that because then they have access to it. And also, when you look at something like Max, you can provide a different value to your offering. So with TV, you're looking at, carriage fees or ad revenue, and then integration with kind of other properties and, cable rankings, all them sort of things. But when it comes to Max, the thing that I think they've sold it on, and Tony mentioned this when he talked about kind of how many people buy pay-per-views and kind of invested, is you have this dedicated fan base that will, buy how many pay-per-views a year, where pay-per-view just isn't selling to anybody else right now.
Right.
You've got very little boxing that's kind of selling. And then after that, UFC is on its own platform and everything. But in terms of pay-per-view content, you haven't got that. So there is an investment level of these fans where you have this huge possibility that they are going to use Max just for this product. And that's where getting the pay-per-views, once they have the capability to do so next year, hopefully at a decent discount, will encourage that. So rather than just dropping cable completely and dropping this thing, your fans for AEW are more likely to be loyal enough that they can, they'll purchase more Max memberships. They're going to subscribe to Max. Whereas someone who's just coming in and out for, whatever sport, whether it be college basketball in the March Madness or coming back out for whatever thing they're coming in and out for, they might just pick it up and drop it. They're more likely to be loyal for a longer period. So I think you're trading off that. And I think that's where the value in this deal comes from as well, is that especially through pay-per-views, that they've been able to kind of demonstrate the extra kind of investment that AEW fans have in the product.
There's nothing negative about the deal. Like, maybe you could argue that you'd like to see it for long. You'd like to have seen it gone longer and not been 3 years, but 5. But even that, I just think there's no negativity here. It's a testament to Tony Khan's vision as a businessman, that he saw a hole in the market for wrestling, that he understood that he was could create a product that would have someone who'd want to buy it, that he maintained the good relationship with WBD, that he was able to expand into Rampage and Collision, that WBD had been happy enough with them that they're willing to spend a chunk more money on them, right? And again, that there's still people out there that are still interested in a AEW product. Like Dave talked today about, there's 2 potential additional packages, and we know about Collision being, or not Collision, Shockwave being shopped possibly to Fox. There's other stuff out there. Like, that's a tremendous, for all that we wrestling fans can shit on the guy for booking and he didn't do this and he didn't do that, there's no negotiable that this is a tremendous achievement for him.
Look, and he was able to let me finally release all those bookmarks I had saved up. So shout out to Tony, knowing that I had to be able to, bring people back to the light, embarrass them, ask them to adjourn for previous comments made, and also be that petty to where they get the responses. You saved this from 2 years ago? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I have nothing else to do.
No, I'm happy to be a petty bitch.
It also ended 83 weeks with Eric Bischoff, so that's an achievement in itself. But no, so you have, it's a tremendous deal. It seems to be over what people were predicting, but I think they've demonstrated their worth to WBD as a brand.
Yeah.
And that's what's important. There's a lot of talk about what's the market value, what's the hourly rate, but I think the most important thing in these numbers is how you can demonstrate to to these networks what you can offer. And that might not be something that you can see very quickly in kind of looking at demo ratings or rankings or that sort of thing. So how valuable are they to WBD is what drives this price.
Right.
Not, measuring it against, NXT hours of viewership. And, the thing about NXT is, and when we talk about the possibility of Shockwave, is the importance of being on linear television is such that you can accept a lower price. IndyCar have 5 years for $25 million. In the UK here, we have for the WSL, because it's women's football season. You knew it was coming back. You knew I was going to talk about it. They have a £7 million a year deal with Sky on cable, but then they go on the BBC one game a week for free. And the idea is that you have access to this viewership that isn't available to you otherwise, and that should help to grow your product. It should, and because now audience is so fragmented.
Yeah.
So you'll have younger viewers using more streaming. You'll have older viewers kind of using more over the air. And then you've got the people in the middle of cable. So if you are going to grow your product, then you getting that access to each part of that, and this was the Nick Khan strategy with WWE, is important. It's massively important. And it makes you less kind of susceptible to volatility. So it doesn't matter if they get something on Fox, it does not matter what price they get.
Yeah, seriously.
Cover the production for it does not matter, because it is worth it for the presence. And it's also allowing you to kind of create a connection with a different media partner, which also safeguards you against the chaos of WBD. But if they were to, so if a Shockwave was to go on, Tuesday, Thursday night, and say it was a 2-hour show, as most people seem to, that seems to be a suggestion, and it would be an A show because it's on Fox. So you would have 2 A shows, okay? Do you think that they would need a roster split?
Rich, you go first.
I hate to say it, but I kind of think they would.
Yeah.
Because I imagine Fox would have a vested interest in it doing well. and they will probably want signature stars. We've heard Fox and with what they were demanding out of WWE, like they wanted CM Punk originally. Roman Reigns was on Fox for all those years. I don't think that was by accident. They would end up needing signature people in both spots, and it would be capitalism swallowing up all elite wrestling to an extent to where it's like when the money comes, you have to move accordingly.
I think my only comment on this, because I agree with you, is like, yes, people can talk about what Fox wants, but WBD, if they could potentially be paying them more than what Fox would want, is like, at what point are you like, what am I sacrificing to this media partner that the other media partner is going to get pissed off at me about, right? Like, okay, we're going to make John Moxley exclusive to Shockwave on Fox. Is WBD going to be pissed because they were sold shows with him being there?
It's going to be a difficult balance. And I think when you talk about potential creative changes and kind of getting things done in the background, what that should be premised to is that you will need to deliver more now than what you are now. So right now we have 2 hours of TV that they invest in and 3 hours of missable content.
Right.
If you watch it, you'll enjoy it.
Sometimes.
But you don't need to watch it.
No.
And they don't need to therefore, work the logistics. So you need to watch it. Whereas here, that's completely different. So you are going to have to balance things out. You are going to have demands from each network. And, we know that they get plenty of demands from WBD as it is. And Fox are probably more demanding than they are. So it's going to be a huge logistical challenge. But I think you're going to need some sort of brand split for numerous reasons. So, you're going to need the logistics. You're not going to have people working multiple days a week every week.
No.
Because then you lose your advantage that you had. Well, it's probably equal now with WWE, but you definitely lose that advantage that you had with WWE at the start in terms of workers. And then the other part of it as well is we keep talking about they have this stagnant of the kind of main event picture where you have the same people in the big spots. And that doesn't mean have a belt. It just means like these are the focused on people.
Right.
You need people to be elevated to rise up. And if you have 2A shows, you do have more opportunities for that to happen. And for more people to get that spot. The worst thing you could do is end up with a Max-dominated show and a Mox-dominated show. Oof. Nobody moves.
Shoot me.
Yeah. And nobody moves. That's no good for anybody. So you've got to have a plan in place where you're looking at, okay, these are the people that we have to start with. And that's maybe a benefit of, whether it's the way it's worked out of Mox having the title now is if they launch a Shockwave, if he's, that guy at the start, even though it's kind of funny because we've seen it, he's not on actually a lot of the third party stuff around big noticeable people, Copeland's much more than him. But he would be a figurehead that they could use in that position with the network that they would know that you could then launch off. But then you have to then bring that forward because the amount of people you've got as stars now, you're going to have to increase that. Yeah. So it's a completely different challenge. It's probably not the best time. They're having issues with popularity. They are hugely successful. And I think this is something that definitely people struggle with. They're hugely successful. They are dropping in popularity. That's it.
Yes.
Right? That does not mean they are not successful. It does not mean I'm attacking them.
I don't understand this, and this was a discussion after the ratings came out for Tuesday Night Show where people are like, we don't ever have to talk about ratings again because they got the TV deal. Like, as someone who was extremely confident that they were going to get a TV deal, to me, the ratings talk is not about like, oh my God, they're going to survive, but more like an indication of like, they're not doing so great right now. They're not as popular as they once were, right? Like, that's okay as a topic point, and I get that not everybody is as rational as we are, but still, like, if we don't have numbers, how do we evaluate the success of certain programs? And we can talk about what we like, but there's a million people that could say a million different things about who they care for, right? And I think, sometimes you just need an objective number to be like, yeah, this is hitting with the audience, it isn't. It's okay.
Just, I think what it is that there's a feeling of being attacked and that you need to protect. And it just plays into that. So we've lost that nuance of kind of in the middle of being able to say these are two of the same statements. And it's ironic because you don't want to compare. I hate doing comparisons to WWE because people get really offended. But they are in that position at WWE in 2019 without the Fiend Seth Rollins Hell in a Cell match because no one ever needs that in the history of the business ever again. No. But they are in that position where they are hugely successful, but they are having issues with popularity. And then they are able to expand internationally, as we've just seen with them signing the Fox deal, picking up one of the deals that WWE are kind of leaving when they go to Netflix. So you have these opportunities now for international investment, for all these other new revenue streams, but that doesn't mean that you've been able to turn your popularity around, and that's cyclical. That'll come around
right
at some point, but they are two different things. But the most important thing for me about this whole thing is that, this deal continues to move the industry forward.
Yes.
It's going to guarantee pay. We've got plenty of stories about people being paid more this year. Good. They should. This industry is far behind most major sports in terms of the percentage that it offers its workers.
Yes.
So that competition is so vital to bringing up the standards of people being compensated for what these companies are generating, and the effort and the work that they put in. So that's the most important thing for me. You can talk about every other thing under the sun, but what it does for people that work in this industry to be compensated much better than they've ever been, to continue that kind of progress, is really important.
Yeah,
go ahead.
It's like just another line of success in the history of wrestling in America. I don't think I think pretty much everyone else is in the rear view aside from WWE at this point. So I think that's something they should celebrate, but also like the job is not finished, as Kobe Bryant would say.
Yeah, and you do have to maintain some level of popularity, because that does maintain your numbers. If they're in top 5, they've been top 5 ranking for Dynamite on TBS since the second quarter of 2021, or TNT it was at the start. They have to maintain certain levels. So that's why everyone will continue to talk about numbers. I know everyone just wants to forget about it and it's like, we never talk about numbers again. But that's unrealistic because they do still have to perform.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are many opportunities for them. Question from the Discord from Nemja for our backlog. Why do overruns happen, or why do you think they happen frequently on Dynamite? My rudimentary understanding is that overruns hypothetically boost overall viewership, but I'm curious if there are more factors at play. Number question. So I'm gonna. What we're gonna do? I'll talk through it and then you can interpret me, because that always works quite well. We have to do it, because I'm like did it off in my head, and then Sarah's like, "Whoa!"
Here's what she actually means, folks.
Yeah, it's like my translator. Like I'm Dave translator, like my translator. But the thing around the overruns are, so there's numerous reasons to do an overrun. In the old traditional way of doing the overrun with WWE was that the next program would be so big that you get this huge lift in viewership, and that would help your overall numbers. And I think that is still the aim, is that they want it to help the overall. But the key thing about that is that the way that AEW's viewership works is 50 plus lasts about 60 to 75 minutes, and then it drops, and that tends to be from the start of the show. Then you've got your 35 to 49. The male demo is quite consistent. The women's demo is very, very high at the start, especially a bit inflated because of the Big Bang Theory. And then it's kind of very low for the rest of the show. So you are relying, when it comes to the end, on 18 to 34. So the key things have always been that you need stakes, or you need people that are drawers in that demo, and it needs to be something substantial that happens. And if you don't have any of them, they don't tend to do traditionally well. So we've just seen the crazy long overrun that they did for the anniversary show. And you can look at it and say, Modern Family does what, 0.4, 0.5?
Yeah.
0.04, 0.05 even, afterwards. And even a Dynamite doing 0.18 is providing more value to WBD in that slot than Modern Family is. So that's why they would look at it like that. But what happened with this one is there was such a dramatic drop-off that people really started to question the value of it. So, the episode did 0.20. It would have done a 0.21 had it been 2 hours. But the quarters dropped from, 7% viewership and 12% of the demo with no ad breaks in quarter 9, so that first 15 minutes, and then another 4%, 3% in the quarter after. And what was different there is they've done this twice before. So when it comes to really long kind of crossovers, the biggest ones we've seen is when they've run Rampage straight afterwards.
Yeah.
And the 2 times they did that, they've used massive things. So they used the Kenny Omega segment in Winnipeg, and they used the Adam Copeland, Christian Cage blow-off match in Toronto. And on the Kenny occasion, that quarter 9, that 15 minutes after went up, because it's Kenny Omega.
Yeah.
That was nasty how they did that too. They were like, it's 10 o'clock p.m. Okada and Omega are face to face for the first time. You're not going anywhere, are you?
They knew what they were doing. They absolutely, full stop, knew what they were doing. But yeah, so the viewership stayed the same, which is quite impressive because the over 50 plus is normally an issue. But you had this huge jump in the demo from 0.22 to 0.25 in that quarter hour. So it jumped up. So then you sustained not only, that quarter hour in terms of how much its value is compared to like a Modern Family rerun or Young Sheldon afterwards, but also you picked up the level of the show because that segment was big enough, because it was that meeting between Okada and Omega. And the same with the Copeland cage match dropped ever so slightly in that 15 minutes. It didn't in the actual part of Dynamite, but the 15 minutes over into Rampage. But it still managed to hold on. And this match that they did with, I think they thought the Okada Danielson match would be a big enough match that it could carry it. But it didn't because it wasn't promoted. And so nobody cared about it. And neither of them are draws in 18 to 34. And that is always going to be your key things. And then they did a shitty ending. So no one's going to want to watch an extra 30 minutes. And then you've got a crappy ending. So you do have to reward people if you do it. But yeah, I think it's about value to your show, potentially. NXT were very good at that when they ran the overruns next to Dynamite, because they would get tune in from Dynamite after Dynamite would finish. So you have value in that, but also what value you can provide to the network over what other content could be in that place. The danger one, I think for most of us, is to think, are they still looking at possibly 3 hours for Dynamite? If we get a shockwave, please just no. So overruns are used to try and maximize your own viewership. I think Tony also uses them to fit everybody in because he prioritizes throwing everything on Dynamite. But also it's a case of what you can provide to the network.
Like they say in The Wire, juking the stats.
That's it, right?
Trish, this has led me one of the things you said has led me to a question that I'm going to throw out there at you because I'm sort of interested in what you have to say about this. You've talked about a couple times, in terms of the ratings, right? And you talked about Danielson and Okada, and they thought it would do this. We talked about this in terms of when you and I discussed last over the summer, and even in the spring, in terms of we don't need Mox because we're going to have Okada and Osprey, and they're going to and Mercedes, and they're going to the expectations that the people at AEW have had about who's going to drive ratings, and the reality of the ratings driving over the last 6 months, 8 months, right? Is that give you any cause for concern that there's such a big disconnect between the perception of what the audience is interested in and what the audience is actually interested in?
I'm not going to blame Twitter, but I think there's an over-reliance on Twitter in terms of engaging what the audience is invested in. So they've got a ton of data. They see a ton of data.
Right.
But I think that the voices that are prominent and that they're hearing tend to be from one age group and male. Yep. And then we've seen it this week. So that, they advertise the Dynamite move just on Twitter, and they do appallingly with women. Right. Because women aren't using that platform predominantly. It's more TikTok, Instagram, whatever it is. But yeah, so I think you've gotten this kind of thing where they think they got to the point where they thought you could just throw a match out and then it would just boost the rating. But it doesn't. This is a dream match thing. It doesn't work. You have to promote these things. And I absolutely think they thought they could do that with this match, and then it didn't. And I hope they learned the lesson from that, because I thought it was foreseeable, massively foreseeable, that it just wouldn't work. You hope. You look at the way they're setting up this kind of BCC Infinity War thing, and you think, using some of the draws previously in 1834, the Orange Cassidy's, the Darby Allin, they are kind of learning that you can't do that. But yeah, their best results have always been when they've promoted. I can't think of a single time where they've thrown something out there and they've, on the day or the day before, and not advertise it on TV, and it's done well. I was thinking about I was listening to Rich on with Sir Samuel on the Match Guide, talking about Vikingo and Kenny Omega, and that was announced on Twitter, but then it was promoted on Rampage, and they ran a video. And then you had all the furore coming off that. So you've got to hit that point as well. You can't just get away with kind of throwing something out there, because then it doesn't mean anything, and then people just don't think it means anything, so they don't care. You have to give people a reason to care, especially younger demos. Older demos, people just turn in. It's what they do every week. When you're competing with so many other things. We got baseball this Wednesday. Dynamite's going to get wrecked by the Mets and the Dodgers. It's the worst possible matchup. Let's go Mets. But so you have to do that, and I think they've not been able to do as good a job of that since the introduction of Collision, and to an extent the introduction of Rampage, as they used to do at the start. And you see the question about from Hunker Jones saying, would you skip a Dynamite card if you got the card and it wasn't very good? And I think, people do it all the time. Like WWE, they think that they don't have to announce anything. Because they're hot at the moment. If you like the words hot or cold. So people are invested in the stories they're telling. They've got things that they're invested in. So they will tune in every week. And it doesn't necessarily matter what matches are on the card. But if you don't have something that a majority of your audience is invested in, then they will pick and choose. Because there's a million other things that we want to watch,
I think beyond that, like, it used to be that you look at the matches on a Dynamite card and it would tell you what angles were going to be advanced that week, right? You almost always could tell, like, the matches were the matches, but they were also part of a larger storyline about what was going on. Like, oh, I've seen this one had a fight with this one, or this got set up in a battle royale, or this was something on the last pay-per-view, or I'm guessing they're going to go here with this. I want to see this. Like, it wasn't just like you said, the dream match era where it was just going to be, two guys fighting with nothing going on it. And I think that's one of the bigger differences in terms of like the card announcement. It's not just about announcing the card. It's sort of telling you, I'm going to see this wrestler definitely. And if I like them, I'm going to want to buy a ticket. Otherwise, I have no idea who's going to be there. And it might be shit, right? It might be a bunch of my non-faves. Or I'm going to know that these are the following angles that are going to be pushed if these are the ongoing angles. And that's something I'm going to want to be invested in.
Yeah, that's fair. And that's the big thing that you could say potentially if there was a brand split, even an unofficial one. You don't need to do a draft or anything like that. But even if there was one, if people had more an idea of who was on each show and who was going to, and you do actually put these people out in front of the crowd every week, then I think you see a benefit. Because one of the benefits of AEW at the start was that you had a consistent kind of cast of characters.
Yeah.
And
you got a movement.
You got that continuity all the way through. And now it's kind of in and out. And, the only people that are focused on are those people.
This is what they wanted to get rid of, Trish. This is what they wanted to get rid of, Sarah. They wanted to get rid of the movement. And it's happened.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to argue with that. But yeah, there is, we talked about Boca Rich the other day, didn't we? Like, do you watch it live? No, I was watching the Mets, I'm not going to lie, because there was nothing on that show that was must see or I was hugely invested in. And that's what you get to think about. It's not just about wrestling as well. We live in a world where everyone has different interests. Not everyone just watches just wrestling. You can't look at it as this world where it's the only thing. And we do that all the time with wrestling, where it's like, it's not connected to anything else, but it is.
Yeah.
So it's I you got to think about it. I think it's a very interesting thing, and I think we kind of talk in absolute so many times, but there's still quite a lot on the table that could change, and a lot of movement potentially. So we won't really know until kind of next year what this landscape actually looks like and what it means for everything. So it's funny because everyone's like, everything's done now, we can just go. It's like, it's not done. It's not over yet. There's still definitely things on the table. Should we talk about some WWE stuff?
Sure.
I'm sure you're thrilled. Rich probably watched more than both of us, actually. I think he's seen one.
I watched Bad Blood, and then by the time Bad Blood was 30 minutes from my house, I wouldn't show up, if I was being forced to by gun point or anything. But man, what an odd show, up and down. But the wrestling is almost the most, uninteresting part.
Irrelevant part, it feels like.
That's how I like it. That's I really like it. Yeah, it's very interesting that The Rock showed up, and now they're saying The Rock might not be at WrestleMania, but he might be at WrestleMania, and it's like he'll do whatever he wants. Like the power games have started already. Cool.
No, I had a lot of favorite things about Wrestling Observer Radio this morning, but Dave fighting with himself about The Rock was probably one of my more enjoyable moments. It was a fun.
His buddy Dwayne.
It was a fun listen. Basically Rock's going to do what Rock's going to do. And while the people in WWE would like to know before the Rumble, they'll just go along with whatever he wants because he is The Rock.
Back for the Netflix debut, I'm sure.
Yeah.
He'll want to.
Anything that makes Paul Levesque's life a little bit tougher is good with me.
No objections here.
Fair enough. Well, I'll skip actually. We'll talk about Paul Levesque first, and then we'll come back to the latter bit. So, question before we talk about the press conference. So, Branovan on our Discord, he sent us on Twitter, but he's on our Discord, has asked, what similarities do you see between Paul Levesque and Vince McMahon? Obviously, Triple H hasn't been accused of anything, but would you say that he has more or less of a cult of personality than Vince?
You go first on this one, Rich.
I think what Paul Levesque has now that Vince didn't have was the willingness for people to just stand up for him in any case. You could always point to the fact that Vince was a monster hiding in plain sight for some people, and some people would be reasonable on that. They'd be like, yeah, I'm not going to ride with him there, but they will walk to the end of the earth for Paul Levesque. And I can tell you, starting from January this year, when I started, doing a lot more directly aiming at Paul Levesque, like where I talked about how he handled the Royal Rumble press conference, about him embarrassing himself there, saying he didn't read the stuff, just the level of vitriol you get in return onto, his problems with booking African American wrestlers. Like, these are all things that I voiced, like, for, quite publicly. And I've done it in hilarious fashion. I've done it in, I've taken the joke approach. I've taken the serious approach. I've taken the direct approach. And all of them return massive levels of vitriol. I don't think, there's really that much difference between them. He did train under the guy for 25 years. As far as how he runs the company, he's not the man that Vince was, like, to where he's just changing everything on the whim and he's number one. Difference is Paul knows he's not the one, essentially. Like, he has to still try to read the room and see how he can maneuver within it. Vince was the room.
I think that's a good point. I think there's a degree to which Triple H, Paul Levesque, doesn't seem to be afraid of wrestling in the way that Vince was. He seems to have, or at least be willing to pay lip service to the type of wrestling that wrestling fans are interested in. Where I think Vince was like, I don't give a shit what you want. This is what I like. We're watching what I like, right? It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be smart. It's what I want to do, and fuck you. And I think that Triple H, at least part of the reason why he has that reputation, which I agree with you 100% with the fans he has now, is because he sort of does pay lip service to doing what they want him to do. Which I think is a more interesting element. But I think in terms of, it's basic consistent storytelling that he does, which is fine. And, he's benefited from coming in at a point where the tribalism is so entrenched that no one wants to go up. Like there's no way, right? Like there's no critique possible. And we see this even with Tony Khan, right? You can't critique him. It's everybody around him, right? It's not Tony Khan's fault. It's on both sides to some degree. And I think he's really benefited from that. And like you said, there's just a legion of people who are willing to defend anything that he does, and unwilling to criticize at all.
See, I'm not even sure how much he believes in that strategy in terms of kind of emphasizing other types of wrestling, or how much he's into it. But I think what he figured out with the NXT stuff is how you can use that to hurt your competition.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what he used. In terms of the biggest thing that we can talk about recently is his kind of relationship with the press and his way of kind of batting it away. And he says, like, has this guy not had media training, or does he just ignore it? And Vince was kind of very similar in this aspect, where he'd become kind of aggressive or combative to media. And then, so last week when he got asked the question around, the lack of African-American wrestlers on his pay-per-view, which apparently, oh, by the way, Rich, no, we started this, by the way. We brought this up, apparently.
You didn't care about this before.
No, it was never a thing before the 9th of September. Oh, Jesus Christ. But, his immediate reaction, what he says is, I see that everybody gets the opportunity. I don't see the difference in anybody. I don't see color. I don't see nationality. I don't see any of it. I just see talent. I don't see the difference between men and women. I see talent. I don't keep track of any of that. And his tone as well. But then you look at it and you're like, why would you say that? Like, that's not someone that's media trained. All you're doing is drawing attention to the issue in your company, and there is an issue. If you didn't think there was an issue, you wouldn't have had Jade, Bianca, and Naomi as guest hosts. And you said that, even though you got your time span wrong, and it actually, other than Naomi, the others were announced before. This kind of came to the forefront again on social media. You look at these things. You do see nationality because you run Gunther in, Berlin. You're on Drew McIntyre in Scotland. You see nationality. Use these things as commercial devices when it suits you. So then to say that you don't see these things is just ludicrous to me.
Like, you could just easily look at Bad Blood, right? In Atlanta. Some people call this the Black Mecca of, like, America and stuff like that. They were willing to spend whatever walkthrough fees on Little Yachty, Metro Boomin. They had Killer Mike sitting around the ring. Various hip-hop artists. Lil Baby was there. Just various hip hop artists that you all or have no problem spending the money for the cultural cachet that comes with that stuff. And there's no effort to really it's not to enhance a wrestler. It's not to enhance, an angle. It's to, WWE is down. Essentially, like WWE is where the black wrestler fans, like, this is, WWE's for black folks. Like, this is like an entire coordinated kind of attempt. And then, like, I just start to question. I'm like, well, why won't you invest in your black wrestlers, like, who are gonna be there when you're not in Atlanta, when you're not, dripping yourself in hip hop, when you're not bringing out an HBCU band in Atlanta to play Cody Rhodes to the ring of all things. Like, Montez Ford is going to be there, every day of the week. Kofi Kingston is going to be there every day of the week. Angelo Dawkins is going to be there. The guys coming up, Carmelo Hayes, Obafemi. They've got, like, and one thing that I got from a lot of people was like, well, who would you push? It's not for me to figure out. That's his job to figure out how, like, if you can figure out what people's strengths and weaknesses are, you can figure out what different people bring to the table. That's all it is. And how you consistently just accidentally miss the point on this for 2 years in a row, essentially. Like, just when we talk about winning singles matches with black male wrestlers who, I once heard the men's singles division drives, how companies, do their business. I've heard this before, right? I won't say from where. Not time yet. But this is where I heard this. So I'm like, all right. Throw the women's tag team belts at me that don't mean anything. Throw something that they normally let the Miz do on big shows, which is hosting, at me. It doesn't mean anything. Where are the actions? Like, because I saw MVP and Bobby Lashley, or MVP, loudly exit this company saying, yeah, he doesn't really get it. Talking about Paul Levesque. I'm not someone that's going to just ignore this. Like, and if it was happening in AEW, because you have to, like, preface this, like, with everything, the questions would still be there. There are still questions to this day. Like, Swerve Strickland winning the championship does not make everything go away. Yeah. It's like, awesome. That was great. What's next? That's literally what it is. Like, and it's almost not like in WWE. It's not what's next for Paul Levesque. It's like what's first.
Yeah.
And it was discouraging to hear that I don't see color, because even if he believed that, even if we take him at face value, it's even worse that he would say that. And it's just like, has no one sat you down and told you, yo, this is just one thing you can't say? If you're a black wrestler, right, and you work for WWE and you're going up and down the roads, you're getting over, you might be selling some merch, and you see all this discourse break out, and you see Triple H say that, you have to just like feel like, wow, there's an old adage, you got to work twice as hard for half as much, right? Man, those numbers might be even out of whack, because like he's telling you, and when he puts that out there, he's gonna have people defend him saying this. Oh, and I met those people in large masses. So it's like people have warped the meaning of like, yeah, man, only people who earn something should get something. It's like, no, man, everyone has their own unique challenges that someone in a position of power like Paul Levesque in 2024 should at least be trying to go to some extent to see someone's challenges, to help them meet, be the people they want to be. Like your company cannot get worse just sticking to one. Your company can only get better the more diverse it is. Like, and that goes to whether you're pushing, Latinos, Latinas. In this case, this was the conversation. It was black men. It was not anything else. It was black men. People have tried to muddy this up. Oh, these such and such people getting pushed. These, it'd be like, that's not the question. Stick to the focus. And it's not like, it's going to get any better any further you go up, because this company's ran by TKO. So we know how they get down. So it's going to be impending on people on social media to wake these conversations up, ask the questions in the press conferences. And this was a great example of why you should ask a question, because he might just tell us the truth.
This is why I get frustrated when people are like, does he not have any does he not have any, media training, right? Because I get it. And I get what you're like, I get that. But I'm also kind of like, forget the media training. I don't want to, he's not listening to anybody tell him what he should say. He's telling you what he actually thinks. And it's fucking shitty, right? It's the same thing about the Janelle Grant stuff. I didn't fucking read it. I don't think it's important, right? I don't see color. I don't think it's important.
Thanks,
right?
Paul.
Thanks. As a woman or a person of color, that's not a fun thing to hear.
And the thing is, the reason why I said like media training is that his history, his personal, things he's done story-wise, things he's said, the DX book and the way he talks about, when they did the blackface with the Nation of Domination and all that stuff. It's like, we've seen that. So you almost want to hear him go out against that and he doesn't. He just reinforces what we've already seen from him. So I expect less, and that's wrong, but he do. I think there's a discussion around culture here, because when we've seen, like, with the Janelle Grant thing this week, and we've seen, her side, her lawyers, go to WWE and say, release everybody from the NDAs. And, so they, in an attempt, and the idea is the way, yes, it's a media PR win for them, because they know WWE aren't going to do this. They know people are tied in too much. There could be anything else under there. They don't want to do that, in a similar way to what NBC did with, the Harvey Weinstein case. So, so they don't want to do that. So they get a PR win, fine. But what it actually says is, we've seen these things. What is changing about this culture? What is different from Paul Levesque's WWE to Vince McMahon's WWE? How is this workplace moving forward like the rest of the world? This is a publicly traded company. So there is like this pushback on when you challenge these things, but you're not challenging them for a point scoring or for a gotcha or for a game. We're challenging them because this industry needs to move forward. And you can hear by the way they speak that there is a resistance to that.
And it's a similar resistance to AEW. Like, and I think in a completely different way, right? I'm not trying to say anything associated with AEW is on the level of the Janelle Grant case or even close to it. Not at all.
No.
But in terms of like people in power being able to make choices and decisions for people rather than it being based on quality of their work, right? We've seen that happen. We talked about that when it came to the CM Punk stuff, right? Like somebody doesn't like somebody and they don't work there anymore. Right? Like that's the kind of stuff that it's sort of all tied into that same thing where and it's part of endemic of our culture in general. The more money you make, the more powerful you are, the more decisions you get to make about the lives of the people around you.
It's just going to be it's an ongoing thing. And, I think we're here, we're not going to shy away from kind of, highlighting kind of social issues and where wrestling can improve. Because being static helps nobody.
But this is why when people say like numbers are terrible, why do you care about numbers? Like numbers sometimes are really important because they can, sometimes a statistic catches on because it reinforces a feeling. It gives you data for a feeling where you're like, I feel like something's weird here. And then you go, yeah, the last person to be in a fucking singles match who was a black man was Ricochet a year and a half ago. And everybody goes, oh, that is fucked up, right? Like that's the kind of stuff like, and sometimes the opposite happens where you have a feeling and the number tells you that your feeling is wrong. And that's also extremely useful. But this is why like we like data so much, we like statistics so much, because it's something to hang a hat on other than just, I feel like Bryan Danielson is the best wrestler in the world.
You just had to get that one in there.
Listen, doing just the best I can today.
No, I agree with all that sentiment entirely. Well, I think that's the kind of the end of our topics. Rich, who's winning out of Zack Sabre Jr. and Tetsuya Naito? This will go out after the match in the morning. But who's winning?
I think it's Sabre time. You already made the guy not main event the Dome. I think you can give him the belt.
Yeah, I think he may main event. That's an interesting one. Is who the hell? I like Josh has the Fury of Okada. And, I don't think that's a bad one, but we'll see how that works out. But yeah, no, I think I agree with you.
Get the LIJ tissue box out.
Hey, I've got one of them. I have one. I got this is a complete. Fuck it, it's like chit chat now, right? During the pandemic, I bought like an evil scepter because like Milano had one and I thought it was cool, and I'm really sad, and I'm a sad little LOJ mark, and Naito's my special guy, and her, okay, right? And it came through, and like it came the week after Evil turned on Naito, and it came with an LIJ tissue box.
I'm telling you, the day you do the face reveal, Trish, you have to go out there completely stone face with the scythe, like as your reveal. I am Trish from Trish and Sarah.
I'm gonna get my scepter out and be like, my wings. I just miss LIJ. Like no. Yeah, no, I agree. I think, especially when they're coming over to the UK, it's Royal Quest at the weekend. So that feels like perfect timing. Sarah, I'm going to ask Tanahashi for a hug.
Do it. Do it. I bet you will.
You guys can't see this, or those who listen to the podcast can't see this, but there's a picture of myself and Tanahashi in America.
And he's breasting. He's breasting so boobily too.
I had his CD of his theme song of his old joint, and he signed the CD for me of his entrance music. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. But yeah, Tanahashi is like, we call him a witch, like he does. He's just the greatest baby face I think ever. So I am very much looking forward to that. I've got a busy week, and
I was getting very excited about the Kenny Omega and Tanahashi content that I saw coming out.
That was so good.
Ecstatic. It's kind of weird that his first steps back into wrestling after this is in New Japan, but all at the same time we're just like, yeah, it's fine. They'll promote him. It's fine.
It might be for the Dome in January. It might that match might be for the Dome in January. We don't know for sure, but
by the way, Rich is doing a Dave impression here.
Yeah, sorry.
That's what that was.
That's what he said. That he said this. There's sometimes with Dave where I just love how completely oblivious he is to things that everyone else just knows. Where he's like, they're doing Tanahashi and Omega versus the Young Bucks. They might be doing it at the Dome in January, and it's like, didn't they actually show the date for that at the end of that video, or am I hallucinating?
On the article, there was an article as well.
Just pick up the phone, Dave. Jesus.
He said on the very same show that he talked to Kenny Omega a bunch of times, which I was like, could you ask?
I am. If that comes off, I will be absolutely ecstatic. I'll be bouncing around,
insanely jealous
around Tokyo. So that'll be really cool. But yeah, I think that brings us to the end. So, Rich, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Well, this was lovely.
Absolutely.
We do love you.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. Happy and proud of the work that you guys and the name you guys made for yourself. You didn't need our help to do it. That's for damn sure. But I'm riding with you guys, and I'm happy to be podcast colleagues with you guys. So
you're the boss man. You're not colleague. You're the boss man.
Calling the shots.
Calling the shots and protecting us when people are saying
oh, that's one thing I'm not going for. Like, if I feel like I think you guys are more than capable of handling yourselves in wrestling debates and everything like that. But when I see an agenda coming, it's not flying. Like that, I will not have.
Oh my!
Why would anyone have an agenda about either of us? We're just wrestling girls. I don't know. That's just a weird thing to me. Just go do your own thing. Come up with your own statistics.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. It is indeed. But you can catch Rich, if you don't already, on One Nation Radio. Normally every Monday evening. Also live on Twitch.
Yes, we stream live on Twitch, and it drops on Tuesdays. We took this past week off because obviously the hurricane and kind of being all that stuff is getting displaced. But if they thought we got away from these topics, like thought some stuff was going to slide by, it is not. I am coming for Paul Levesque again.
Let's go.
Get ready.
But I'm also very glad that everyone is safe, especially around our network and everyone else. And some extreme weather globally lately that's pretty scary. So yeah, very glad that Keeping It Strong Star Boys especially are safe, and James is with you as well. So that was quite reassuring. But yeah, you can catch Rich on One Nation Radio. I'm doing your unplug better than I'm going to do mine.
Thank you.
So there you go.
This is true.
It's true. You can catch all the rest of the shows on the Social Suplex Network on your podcast feed or on the website. You can join us at the Social Suplex Discord, where you can speak to all the hosts, you can ask questions, you can interact about pretty much anything. It's baseball season, so if you come in my channel, you've been warned. It's Matt's week, it's going to be me all week, but come and join us there. And then you can also buy some wonderful Social Suplex merchandise at www.chopped. I say dash. You say hyphen?
I say dash.
Okay, cool. I'll say hyphen.
Trish, you're not going to do a Matt Jackson impersonation.
No, I'm not. No. Anyway, www.chops-tees.com/social suplex. If you want to contact us, you can email us at trishandsarahpod@gmail.com, trishandsarahpod@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Trish and Sarah, where we'll be troublemaking at Trish and Sarah. You can find Sarah at Sarah Graps. And if you want to follow me, send me a message and I will follow you. I'm enjoying my peace and not being able to get involved in stupid arguments. Because I'm very good at that, so it just saves me some hassle. So this has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast with our special guest, Mr. Rich Latta, producer extraordinaire. We'll be back in a fortnight. Yeah, fortnight.
That's 2 weeks, y'all. 2 weeks.
To catch up with, I think what's going to be a very interesting October, I believe. We're going to see some developments this month, so I look forward to that. Until then, I've been Trish.
I've been Sarah.
Oh, come on, Rich. I set you
up.
I'm
Rich. I'll holla at y'all.
This has been our podcast. Thank you for listening.